You made some comments, I think, about a week or two ago that at least the corporate tax cuts, I think you're speaking just about the corporate tax cuts, had effectively already paid for themselves. Just as clearly on a absolute basis, tax revenue is higher than it was before last year.
No, I actually gave, just to be clear on that, I gave very clear definition of what I was talking about. And I think that Steve Moore even wrote a Wall Street Journal article to follow up on the math. But the basic idea is the corporate side is really as Larry Kudlow would say, the growthier side of the tax bill. That's where a lot of the growth has come from. We had 10% capital spending growth over the first half of the year, and that gives you a heck of a lot of GDP. If you just extrapolate that out over the next 10 years and consider that when you get GDP, you get revenue from everything, like payroll tax and everything, then the extra revenue
when you
get from the growth.
Out, what number are you extrapolating at? And the reason I ask that is obviously,
right. Well,
if you look at the Journal this morning, for example, they're talking about the economy slowing to 2.5% in the first quarter of next year, 2.3% by the third quarter of 2019. Fed expects it to slow further to 1.8% in 2021. If that's the case, how can it pay for itself?
Right. Well, again, if you just assume that the growth goes back to what the CBO said, but take the extra growth this year, then you get a heck of a lot of extra revenue. And don't forget that the corporate side, the corporate side only cost, about $400 billion on a static basis. And so it takes a very tiny increment to growth over 10 years to get enough revenue to pay for the corporate side. And so, again, you get something like $6 trillion more GDP over 10 years with the increment to growth that we've had.
People are saying
and so it's easy to pay for $400 billion.
Inflation adjusted, that was Austin's excuse on Friday, was that even though it was a record for tax revenues for the past year, that, I don't know, if it's inflation adjusted, it's not a record or something. But if you're able to generate, if it really did help generate the 3% plus, and it stays static, the corporate taxes go down, but overall taxes are up 1% or 2%, and you get 3%, I think that you just put that as a check mark on the win column. But if it goes down,
or another way to ask your liberal guests that say there's about $1 trillion less revenue over the next 10 years, but $6 trillion more GDP.
Right.
Those two numbers are about right. Is that a trade? Is that a trade you should take?
But just to put a definition around this, Kevin, you're talking about this in the context of corporate taxes, not on the total tax package.
No, I'm just basically saying that suppose that the corporate revenue was the only thing that we had changed, and it cost us $400 billion, and then we got all the growth that we've seen. Well, we're going to get revenue from things besides the corporate tax, and if you add up that revenue just as like the normal revenue share of GDP, you get something that's like more than 3 times the $400 billion cost of revenue. And I really think that most of the growth we got this year is certainly before the third quarter, where we saw a consumption spike that might be related to the tax cuts, was from the corporate tax.